I want to talk about the background, neurology and cognitive science. The main focus is how do you handle so many languages in your brain, avoiding interference from the non-target language. We'll start off talking about executive functions in general. It's like a traffic controller. That's the best metaphor. You see that the executive functions are mainly in the prefrontal regions of the frontal lobe. So like a traffic controller has many things to handle. There's the pilots, navigators, controllers, weather forecasters, etc. We need to use in the same way many different cognitive skills in the case of the executive function. The main aspects of the executive function are working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility. All three are very important when you are dealing with more than one language. Okay, so an adult can remember multiple tasks. It develops over time from infancy. Adult can remember multiple tasks, rules, and strategies that may vary by the situation. Okay, that's for working memory. And inhibitory control, an adult has consistent self-control, situationally appropriate responses. There's cognitive flexibility. That means able to revise actions and plans in response to changing circumstances. Okay, you switch languages, obviously you have a change in circumstances there. There's a bitter fight over whether or not bilingualism or multilingualism improves executive function in general, nonverbal aspects. Bilingual has to deal with two languages at the same time. In other words, studies show that both languages are always activated. Okay, studies show that for bilingual, but my own personal experience, I don't have 30 or 40 language activated at the same time. And I'll have the ones I've spoken recently, and we have more than one language activated at any one time. So we're having to suppress the language that is not appropriate. But the problem is that they rarely focus on multilinguals or polyglots. It's usually bilinguals. And they fail to control differences in IQ and socioeconomic status, which both affect the executive function. And control for, very important, failure to control for the level of attainment in the foreign language or languages and how the languages are used in daily life. Even though some studies show that level and language use are important factors when comparing bilinguals and multilinguals in relation to these tests they're doing. They're giving certain kind of tests to see whether these people do better than monolinguals. For example, you have right and left, okay? And you have to say, push a button. Is it right or left that you're seeing written out? But the right might come on the left side and the left side might come on the right side, you see? So you have to suppress the direction and only go for the word. Okay, they do tests like that to say it's nonverbal. What's verbal means you're reading something, but you can do it other ways where there's no language involved. You also have to control for the degree to which multilinguals demonstrate control of their languages. Some people are better than others, and we're always better in some circumstances than others. So bilinguals are with stronger language control have a cognitive advantage in these tests involving the executive functions. Okay, in particular, inhibition, self-monitoring, watching your performance, problem solving, generative fluency, etc. Okay, so what's the solution here? Hopefully people who do these experiments will watch this and they'll say, oh yeah, I should come to a polyglot gathering or a polyglot conference. Then you control for age, socioeconomic status, IQ, number of foreign languages spoken, variations in language, and the degree, importantly, the last one, the degree of inhibition the subjects have on negative language transfer, and there's interference. Okay, you want to say it in one language, but another word comes, etc. Now let's take a look at what neuroimaging tells us about the general executive functions in relation to multilingualism. Right there you see overlapping neural substrates between language control and nonverbal executive control, and functional overlap in the left inferior gyrus in bilinguals where there's no overlap in monolinguals. So we see a difference in the structure of the brain between a monolingual and a bilingual. So if you're really proficient in, let's say, 3, 4, 5, 10 languages, obviously your structure of your brain is going to also be quite different. Language choice and switching rely on interrelated processes, predominantly engaging frontal subcortical regions. Some regions have been associated with executive functions and cognitive control in a variety of tasks that have nothing to do with language. So bilinguals who are more balanced in dual language use have larger working memory and task mixing resources that buffer, and also they buffer against performance decline following language control. Scans of the brain demonstrate that the frontal executive control systems involved in switching between languages are the same that are used for selective attention. So these control networks are used more efficiently in bilinguals than monolinguals, particularly in older bilinguals. White brain, it's essential for impulse conduction of information through neural networks, and they are critical for learning complex skills and higher level cognitive functions. So you can look at monolinguals, compare them to multilinguals, and see the differences in white matter in their brain in certain areas. So white matter volume changes in bilingual children and adults. This observation comes from research looking at early and older bilingual individuals who have been using both their first and second languages every day for many years. So then you have gray matter. Gray matter refers to how many cell bodies and dendrites there are. Bilingual experience makes gray matter denser. It becomes denser, and it's a healthier brain. So let's talk about working memory. There's different types of memory. You have working memory, short-term memory. Short-term is temporary storage of information for retrieval. And working memory is you use that memory. So both short-term memory and long-term memory hold information for working memory. So you have working memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, and then you have the executive function that seems to play a role in both short-term and working memory. The region serves as temporary storage facility for short-term memory, while at the same time making the memory available for recall and manipulation. Okay, here's one model of working memory with three basic components. So you have that air traffic controller, the executive system, with two subsidiary storage systems. One is phonological sketchpad or phonological loop, and the other is a visual sketchpad. And they have temporary storing of verbal and nonverbal information. Here's another diagram. The executive function, working memory, attention and memory. In the central executive system. And okay, so this is visual sketchpad, kind of sketching what you're seeing, okay, in your brain. And the phonological sketchpad, it has some kind of sketch of the sounds that you heard. Right? So using sketch here because it's not complete. Also, the episodic buffer was added to account for the way in which these various subsystems that you see here work together, and in particular how they could interface with long-term memory. You have spoken language, conversation, a given context. You have auditory information, visual information. And then up here you see phonological storage and subvocal, phonological loops, subvocal rehearsal, episodic buffer, like episode, like a story. It's creating a story in your brain. And then your visual information all working together. The central executive is controlling that. It's also taking information from long-term memory. So the episodic buffer integrates and manipulates material, what you're hearing, what you're seeing. It has very limited capacity and depends heavily on this executive processing. And it binds together information from different sources in chunks or episodes, like a little story. Like see an episode of a film or something, or a TV series, okay? Therefore, episodic. The phonological loop, on the other hand, uses Broca's area, which controls motor functions involved with speech production as a kind of inner voice. It repeats the sound, so you can hold them in working memory. The central executive, which regulates the flow of information in and out of the phonological loop and visual sketchpad, both as coming from perceptual organs. In other words, you're hearing something, you're seeing something at that time, or from long-term memory. So it's orchestrating this process, integrating it. When we read a target language, a word or a phrase, the image is held in the visual spatial, the VSP, while the phonological loop, PL, may seek to pronounce it. Some people read out loud, right? Okay, especially when you're trying to learn the language, but we do it in our head anyway, right? We just don't see a word, and there's no reaction in terms of sound in our brain if you have normal functioning. So it's seeking to pronounce this information. So it's trying to you hear a new word, or you see a word, you read a word, you try to get its sound, and then you're checking your long-term memory. Do I know this word? What is this? Okay, I can't find a match for this word. All right, if a match is found, okay, finished. You got it, you understood it. But you can't find a match for this word. So this central executive will then call upon a range of interpretive process. How am I going to understand this? As well as other resources from long-term memory. Working memory will hold any external or internal long-term memory information for only a few seconds. And conscious effort to keep it there by focusing a considerable amount of attentional resources and processing is necessary. The deeper information is processed, the longer a memory trace will last. Deep, what does deep mean here? So, defined as meaningfulness extracted from the stimulus. How meaningful is it? It's not how many times you try to analyze it. Is it meaningful to you? Next one, you have distinctiveness, how much it stands out. And relevance, how important is it to you? So if you have shallow processing, only involves maintenance rehearsal. Keep repeating it. And it leads to a fairly short-term retention. So you may have to repeat the foreign word or phrase numerous times, or you could repeat it numerous times without creating distinctiveness or relevance. Okay, if you don't have that, then it's going to disappear, even though you repeat it, but it doesn't stand out, it doesn't mean anything to you. Okay, so what can we do about that? You can reworking, you're putting the information in your own words and talking about it with somebody. A method of loci, when trying to remember a list of items, linking each with a familiar place or route. In a memory contest, given a deck of cards, might have an association with every card in the deck, and they imagine walking into their house, and they create a story as they're walking. First on this side, something's going on. So they remember the order of the cards through imagining walking through the house. Imagery, so you create an image of something you want to remember, and you elaborate on it. You make it more meaningful. I think that will make sense when you see that, right? So here, for example, somebody for a test is trying to remember Bela Bartok. Okay, so you have a bell, and he's talking, blah, 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 and he has a bar, and the piano's in front. So piano, Bela Bartok. Phonological loop as a language learning device. So it supports acquisition of language by providing a temporary means of storing new words while they are consolidated in phonological long-term memory. So phonological just means the sound of. The sound is stored in long-term memory. So there's two basic components of this. One is temporary speech-related acoustic store, what you're hearing, and the other is subvocal articulatory rehearsal process, going over it and over in your mind. And the PL appears to serve as part of the process of learning syntax also. When you're hearing a phrase, it stores multi-word language patterns that are used for the abstraction of rules governing connected language. So the capacity of the PL has been argued to influence vocabulary learning. Familiarity of the target materials has been shown to influence capacity. So the PL can effectively hold more known words than unknown words. And we can see a very fast automatic utilization of interaction of chunks, not just a word, but a chunk, a phrase, with the short-term and long-term memories. The same is true of capacity of phrases, clauses, and sentences. Psychological linguistic patterning interacts with auditory input. And this interaction results in effectively increases the capacity, your ability to remember more of the sound that you heard. One implication of this observation is there's the benefit of learning foreign languages in chunks. It's learning whole expressions in the target language, in context. You practice the chunk with repetition. It can lead to consolidation of the phrase and eventually syntactical patterns in long-term memory. Okay, so you're getting syntactical patterns, you're getting the grammar that way. So sometimes when I study a language that has a very different grammar, though I'm the type that reads a lot about the grammar at the same time, still I'm trying to keep a long sentence in my mind because it serves as a model for the grammar for the syntax. Okay, so now let's look at the advantages of multilingual. Well, one is related to processing sounds. So if you're multilingual, you have an increase in efficiency in processing auditory information and the executive function of paying greater attention to relevant versus irrelevant sounds. Now, I have substandard hearing and I read lips. It's not easy to read lips in a language I'm just starting off in. But at my age and such, when there's a lot of noise interfering, I don't pick it up so well. Still, multilinguals are better at this than monolinguals, given the same hearing ability. So that is an inhibitory control. Now, the effort and attention needed to switch between languages triggers more activity and potentially strengthens the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. There it is. And this is part of the brain that plays a large role in executive function, problem solving, switching between tasks, not just language, switching between nonverbal tasks, focusing while filtering out irrelevant information. So, very interesting. You can use cathodal stimulation, you're getting electricity, kind of a shock coming into your brain, over this area that we just looked at. And it improves language switching performance. Isn't that fantastic? So this implies that in addition to increased language proficiency, enhanced inhibition also contributes to improved language control. It looks similar to this. And electrical shocks are coming to your head, and you can get your own personal stimulator during lunch break, only 120 euros. Now, let's take a look at another aspect. Now we're getting into things that affect your ability to stay in one language, to prevent unwanted interference from other languages. So when speaking a target language, you are not thrown off track when you make mistakes. You experience greater learning from your mistakes. You maintain higher emotional and psychological energy. You can stay focused in the target language. You have self-esteem, you're positive, you have confidence, you can avoid negative linguistic interference, mixing languages. You notice that your ability to stay in one language goes down as you get anxious or make mistakes. At least there's a tendency. Whether you can block that or not, that's the question. So let's take a closer look at positive priming. Priming means bringing it to the forefront, making it happen. Positive trait associations, positive mental and emotional states, self-confidence and self-esteem. Okay, there was an interesting experiment carried out with college students to examine how self-esteem influences the monitoring of one's own performance. So they activated implicit associations in the participants being clever or being stupid that were task relevant. So they had to do something. And they sent signals, implicit signals that some of you are really good at. Born naturals. You guys, you suck. So they activating a representation of clever caused participants to slow their reaction time after errors on the working memory task. While the reverse pattern was seen for those with the stupid associations. I'm no good at this task. Okay? And the control group? No, because they weren't told whether they're stupid or clever. When people prime with the word clever made an error, this is a very important part, there was enhanced activity in the medial prefrontal cortex. So what's important here is something's going on in the brain when they make an error. So this increased activity was not seen after people gave a correct answer. It only happens when you give a wrong answer. And importantly, it was not seen when the subjects thought they were stupid. They don't have this activity going on in the brain when they make a mistake. So identifying future goals and recognizing the actions that will lead to achieving these goals are important executive functions. And priming with the word clever can increase self-confidence or self-esteem. The activity observed in this experiment when primed with clever appears to correspond with the motivation to an actual action of learning from mistakes. If you are clever, then you learn from your mistakes. While if you're stupid, then mistakes are natural. And any effort to learn from them is useless. You're just stupid at this. It's not clever and stupid in general. It's good at something, bad at something. Positive priming may augment the executive functions related to performance speaking foreign languages. So positive priming, getting this message that, you're good, etc., may come in such overt ways as compliments on how well you speak the language. you're here interacting with others, and they actually say, wow, you're really good. You only studied for 3 months? That's fantastic. They can also be subtle cues. Subtle cues, the possibility of negative priming is much stronger. Okay, very few people, especially at the Polyglot gathering, say, hey, you're really no good in that language. Why don't you just drop it? I mean, God, you're butchering the damn thing. Just leave it alone, will you? No, they won't do that. So we don't have that problem with this explicit message, but we have it with the implicit message, like looking at the eyes, the face, emotional reactions. We tune into it. Okay, nevertheless, if positive priming can be achieved, then there is a greater ability to learn from your mistakes, inhibit them from affecting your performance in the target language. So the brain in positive states, optimistic states, performs considerably better than it does in negative, neutral, or stressed states. Your intelligence, your creativity, your energy levels rise in positive states. So neurologically, dopamine floods into your system. Dopamine is a chemical neurotransmitter, sending the information around in your brain, making the connections, retrieving things from long-term memory, working with working memory, etc. Okay? It facilitates all of this. Attention, memory, storage, comprehension, executive function, so inhibiting unwanted interference from other languages. There's obviously positive transfer between languages, right? If you started to speak to me in Czech, and I understand everything, then it's because I know related language. I've studied some Slovak, speaks Polish well, etc. That's positive transfer. Okay, we're talking about negative transfer here. Anxiety affects performance via its adverse effects on attentional control. Where's your attention going to? It's a key function of the central executive. So there's a control theory, and it assumes that there are two attentional systems. One influenced by the individual's current goals, expectation, and knowledge. This is a top-down, goal-driven system. And the other is a stimulus-driven system influenced by salient stimuli, things you're paying attention to. So salient here simply means the things that catch your attention. So anxiety disrupts this balance between the two systems by enhancing the influence of stimulus-driven bottom-up processing over the more efficient top-down. You have a goal, you're going towards it, that's the top-down driven. Here, something comes to you, it's bottom-up, you have to deal with, just the interference coming at you. So you see you have your top-down goal, you want to perform well speaking that language. Then things causing anxiety when speaking a foreign language could, some cues or such. I made a mistake, this person thinks I don't speak well, etc., etc. Anxiety affects attentional control, a key function of the central executive control component of working memory. So anxiety not only impairs processing efficiency, it also impairs inhibition function, keeping the unwanted interference away. And the shifting function between what you're thinking about, your train of thought, changing your train of thought, tangents in a conversation, switching between languages, etc. The adverse effects of anxiety under distraction conditions are greater if you feel there's a threat. If you fear that you're making mistakes, the effects of anxiety, fear, makes anxiety stronger. Being anxious about performance is different than simply wanting to perform well. Threat-related stimuli in terms of the situation when you're speaking a foreign language, such as people you're talking to, or internally generated, such as negative thoughts about your ability, they're going to have a greater effect. How do you manage your anxiety? Number of ways. We have to be aware of it, and we learn to practice anxiety, reducing breathing techniques, etc. First, I'll say input from polyglots. This is my own experience, plus I put on Facebook and talk to other people to get information. Okay, when do you experience this interference? When does it happen most? Normally, words that sound the same or similar, but with different meanings, or languages with lexical and grammatical similarities. Okay, so you're a Russian speaker, you're speaking Polish or Slovak, etc. It's the grammatical aspects. So just kindly put a diagram together. This is his experience. Like he's speaking Greek here, and he uses the wrong Greek word because it sounds like the German word with intended meaning. Cross-linguistic interference usually occurs from languages that have been recently activated. Okay, so as I said, scientific studies show that more than one language is always activated in a bilingual. But if you speak 10 languages, it doesn't mean they're all activated all at the same time. There's no study on it because they don't study people like that. But we know continuous switching between languages. Polyglot group here. and no time to rest. But when I'm tired, then just everything goes out the window. It occurs when one has developed considerable competence, may occur more often after an extended period of non-use, obviously. You haven't used it in a long time. It occurs a lot in interjections, okay? So, just a short reaction, and it may come in a different language. You're exhausted or frustrated. You lose your confidence. You see something, it stimulates a memory. Oh, that's when I was in Brazil, and da-da-da, so Portuguese comes to mind. How do we prevent it? Here's a lot of suggestions coming from myself and other polyglots. General observations. The higher level of proficiency in a given language, the less likely interference will occur. Confidence, we just went through why confidence is important, right? So if you're feeling confident in the target language, the interference is reduced. Okay, feeling the language. This is interesting, okay? You feel the language. For example, each language has its own room in your head. And you go in the room, and you close the door, and you try to stay in. We try to bring back memories and feelings that you had when you spoke that language well. Particularly important, so it's hard to feel the language when somebody says, okay, speak to me in such a language. Better you have somebody you're talking to. One polyglot said, this is actually Alex, he said that he does not mix the additional languages of Afrikaans and Dutch because they feel different. I don't mix them, I just avoid speaking Dutch and speak Afrikaans. Yeah, it's better for me. All right, so another polyglot speaks of entering a different mind space. You might need priming. You watch a movie in the language or listen to the radio or something. So intentionally becoming multilingual and multicultural increases the potential likelihood of expressing the chameleon effect. The automatic adaptation of our physical and linguistic behavior to match the people we're interacting with. When you do so successively, when you're imitating the body language, the prosody, the accent, etc., you're less likely to make grammar mistakes, you're more likely to remember the words. Even a language in which there's a high level of competence may be temporarily blocked. Okay, it happens to me all the time. It doesn't come at that moment, so you need something to prime it, to activate it. One thing you can do is you can memorize sentences in both languages. Okay, laddering from one to the next. Teach your mind to distinguish them. If two particular languages cause problems, you can compare sentences, longer text in both languages. You can study, let's say you speak Spanish well and you want to study Portuguese, but your native tongue is German. Okay, study it in Spanish. A strong sensitivity to how each language has its own unique musical qualities may help avoid lexical interference. Okay, because that doesn't sound like an Hungarian word. It doesn't have that rhythm. So something's wrong here. Refining your pronunciation in 1 minute and process becoming very aware differences in the phonology between languages can help you avoid that. Interference between similar sounding words. You image a certain particular native speaker, especially if this person, you listen to them speak the language often. Okay, so the person made this comment, for example, for French, spoke of a French politician and had that in mind, almost done. And the stronger linguistic cultural identity formed in the target language, the greater resistance there is to interference. You try to bring back memories of when you spoke the language well and re-experiencing them, because memories are tagged with language. A high level of self-awareness and control, such as those induced by fasting, meditation, and yoga. I did my best ever in my whole life after basically 1 month of fasting, but no food for 10 days, and meditating, and yoga, and Reiki, and coming out of sauna at a Buddhist monk in Thailand. It's a long story, I have no time to tell it, but it's the best I've ever done in my life. No problem switching. Somebody was trying to test me in languages. If you would like to know more about my experience over the past 5 decades, learning and using more than 30 languages around the globe, with adventures in 101 countries so far, then please visit my website, polyglotdreams.com. There you will find my memoir, A Life in 30 Languages, translated in various languages and integrated with audio and dual readers to offer a great way to improve your target languages.